From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN Noon News.
Good afternoon. I'm Victoria Hill. Thank you for joining us on the Noon News. Our top story this Tuesday, it is finally Election Day. Montana voter turnout continues to strengthen throughout the day, with a little more than 81% of ballots returned as of late last night. According to the Secretary of State, Montana's record was set in 1968 with 86.4%. As MTN chief political reporter Mike Dennison tells us, the ballot is chock full of races with both statewide and national significance.
This year, it's an election like none you've ever seen, and in Montana, perhaps even more so. Let's start with the voting process. In 45 counties, the regular polling places are closed today because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But ballots have been mailed to all registered voters in these counties, including in the state's 8 most populous, which contains 70% of the voters statewide. The result has been a record high number of ballots cast, and thousands more voters will be turning in their ballots today in person or showing up to register to vote. They'll also be going to the polls in those 11 counties that chose not to go to all-mail ballots. As for the statewide contest in Montana, President Trump is expected to win the state over Democrat Joe Biden. The only question may be by how much. But in the other major races, closer contests are the norm. Montana will choose a new governor among Republican Greg Gianforte, Democrat Mike Cooney, and Libertarian Lyman Bishop. Gianforte has spent $7.5 million of his own money on the race, trying to win a seat that he narrowly lost 4 years ago and become the first Republican governor here in 16 years. Voters also will choose a new Attorney General, Secretary of State, and State Auditor, a contested seat for the Montana Supreme Court, and 2 new members of the State Public Service Commission. They'll elect a new legislature, but party control shouldn't change much from its current makeup of Republican majorities at 58-42 in the House and 30-20 in the Senate. Montanans also will choose a new U.S. House representative, Democrat Kathleen Williams or Republican Matt Rosendale, who are in what's expected to be a close contest for a seat that Republicans have held for 24 years. And finally, the biggest race in the state, the $160 million plus battle for a U.S. Senate seat between Republican incumbent Steve Daines and Democratic Governor Steve Bullock. All polls point to a photo finish, which may not be decided until late tonight or tomorrow morning when all the votes are counted. The winner of this contest could determine which party controls the U.S. Senate and therefore a bellwether for the future course of the nation. It doesn't get much bigger than that. So if you haven't voted, get on down to the county election office today. As I said, it's an election like none we've ever seen. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And voters have until 8 o'clock tonight to cast their ballot, drop it off, or register and vote. Now it's time to get a check of weather with Ed over at the Weather Center. Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Victoria. We got a lot of wind. That's been the story over the last few days. Here's where the current winds are now. Very light in western Montana, but get down the east slopes and we're seeing some of those stronger gusts from Cut Bank all the way to the Cody foothills of northern Wyoming, and a bit of the breeze pushing off into the eastern plains as well. Now the winds will pick up again tomorrow. We'll see a lot right down the east slopes tomorrow, Great Falls northward up towards Havre. But as we start getting in towards Thursday afternoon, those winds will become more widespread, pushing across the eastern plains. So in the next couple of days, we'll start to see a contrast in the weather, going from our fall conditions and these warmer than average temperatures in many locations to cold and snow as that wind pushes through. Take a closer look at the forecast details coming up.
Thank you so much, Ed. Local election officials are thankful for a new law allowing them to unseal and begin counting ballots prior to Election Day. As MTN's Jay Cohn reports, it's just what the doctor ordered as the COVID-19 pandemic forced much of Montana to an all mail-in election.
Let the counting begin. The number of votes cast this election year already has set a new record across Montana. Now the hard part, counting those thousands of ballots. As you can imagine, the process of opening, flattening, and getting those ballots ready to be counted is both labor intensive and time consuming.
It really is. Our choke point is actually human hands unfolding paper. You know, the machines run pretty quickly, but they're not that, you got to wait for the paper to put through them. So it just takes a little bit of time.
Election Administrator Brett Rutherford in Yellowstone County credits election officials across the state who recognized the huge surge in people choosing to vote absentee in many of the past elections. They got the legislature to pass a new law, and took action to lessen the load on Election Day and night.
Senator Roger Webb carried Senate Bill 162 for us, and basically we were allowed to open the secrecies last Thursday and Friday and get them flattened out and ready to count, and we actually started counting today, the day before Election Day, which will help out immensely. We didn't write the bill thinking there'd be a pandemic, so it doesn't solve all of our problems, but it sure does help.
Presidential election years are always the most stressful on election officials, but this year may take the cake. Made even more stressful this year with numerous lawsuits challenging everything from the mail-in election itself to the deadline for turning in ballots to restricting the number of ballots one person can collect and turn in. All those suits making their way through the court system as Election Day drew near.
I don't expect the lawsuits to stop. I bet they keep going after Election Day. So we just got to roll with it. If we get new directives, we do what we got to do.
Even with a day's jump start on counting ballots, officials say to expect many of the races not to be finalized until Wednesday afternoon or later. So patience will definitely be a virtue for all of us in this 2020 election year, an election year like no other. In Billings, I'm Jay Cohn reporting for MTN News.
And with this year's early ballot counting, the first vote totals will be released at 8 o'clock tonight. We'll be the first with those early numbers, so keep it here on MTN for complete election night coverage beginning at 4 o'clock this afternoon. One of the staffers running Republican Greg Gianforte's campaign for governor has been fired for vandalizing a woman's car in Bozeman. A police report shows former campaign manager Daniel Duffy opened his car door and repeatedly slammed it into a vehicle parked next to him. The incident happened last Monday, but the police report was filed 2 days later. Originally, both parties agreed to work it out without pressing charges, but the owners of the vandalized car changed their minds. They said their decision to file a report was not political. Gianforte's campaign released a statement saying they fired Duffy as soon as they learned of the incident. On to court news now. A Carroll College football player is facing felony charges for allegedly raping a woman in Helena. 20-year-old Jacob Metters from California appeared in court yesterday on an aggravated sexual intercourse without consent charge. The incident happened Saturday night. A woman says Metters forced himself on her after being told no multiple times. Police say she had injuries consistent with sexual assault, and Metters changed his story several times in interviews. His bond was set at $40,000. Now we go to Glacier National Park, where an 18-year-old Missoula woman died in a scuba diving accident. The victim was part of a group of 6 people who started their dive near the dock of Lake McDonald Lodge. Another member of the group was flown to Seattle with injuries related to the accident. Right now, officials still do not know exactly what went wrong and are investigating. No other details about the incident were released, including the names of those involved.